My name is Jonathan Kuttab. I'm a Palestinian attorney, human rights person for many, many years. I was one of the founders of Sabeel, and maybe I have been asked to give a little bit of a history as to how Sabeel started. Currently, I am the executive director of FOSNA, Friends of Sabeel, North America. But FOSNA actually started very much out of group meetings that we would have at the St. George's Cathedral, the Episcopal Church in Jerusalem, after services every Sunday. Now, some of you may know it's strictly an article of faith among Episcopalians that a sermon should not exceed 11 minutes under any circumstances. So when Naim Atik would give his sermon, and sometimes he would abbreviate it to 9 minutes if he had to give a 2-minute English translation. And that was not enough, obviously. So after the service, we would meet in the in the community hall and the diocesan community hall there, and we'd talk. We'd start with the sermon and then talk about the current situation, talk about the occupation, talk about devils and angels, violence, non-violence, occupation, human rights, relations with Muslims, relations with Jews, and it became a very popular event because people from different denominations were coming to attend. The general thrust was, how do we as Palestinian Christians make our faith relevant under these very difficult circumstances that we are living, under occupation, under conflict, under pressure, under tension, with hatred, with oppression, with evil? How do we as Christians react? Do we stay out of it? Can we stay out of it? If we are involved in it, how do we get involved? What form will our involvement take? And believe it or not, the issue was not always politics. We were also concerned about the life of the church, and the church with a capital C, which included all the different denominations, the relations between clergy and laity, the relations between denominations and each other. How do we live out our lives as Christians in the Holy Land? Now, of course, necessarily, we would often come back to the political situation, and particularly to how it is viewed by Christians through the Bible. So Christian Zionism became a very important part of our discussion, the abuse and misuse of scripture to justify our oppression. But also, what is our role? What do we do about it? How do we address it? After Naim Atik, who was basically the mover behind this whole movement, after he formally retired, he became even more active and involved and started the Sabeel Ecumenical movement. For those of you who attend the Thursday Bible study, which Naim Atik is doing these box, every week, we're basically continuing to do the kind of lay theology that Naim Atik started with. Of course, Naim is a theologian. He has written books, especially Justice and Only Justice, but other books on Palestinian liberation theology. But lay people also participated in how do we understand our faith in a way that is liberationist, that gives us life, that gives us hope, that keeps us engaged and involved. And this is what Sabeel has been doing. Now, friends of Sabeel in the US and other places grew out of this movement. People who attended our conferences and conventions, or who made trips to the Holy Land with Sabeel, wanted to stand alongside and support Sabeel. Now I will turn it over now to Omar, who will tell us what is Sabeel currently doing in Palestine, in Jerusalem, so that we can feel, we can stand alongside them and find out how we can support them and how we can promote their ideas and their ideals. Omar, take it over.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you all, friends. I see many familiar faces, but I also see new faces. Thank you for making the time just to listen to another one of the Sabeel lectures. Usually people have, it depends on whom you're speaking to, people have a different understanding what Sabeel is. So it depends on who you ask in Palestine, they'll give you a different definition of what Sabeel is. I hope through this presentation, or that I have put together, that I will be able to help you to understand, to give you a map of the work that Sabeel is doing currently. And when I say currently, I mean in less than 1 year, the areas of work that we usually do. So Sabeel started as a theological movement to respond or to take care of Palestinian liberation theology, which came to respond to the theological Nakba. That for us Palestinians, a part of being dispossessed from our land, from our property, becoming refugees, we're living under a military occupation, we're living under so many unjust systems. We felt that also we were being deprived from our Bible, from our faith. So it really shaken our theological understanding. How could we really reconcile that God is a God that justifies what has happened to us? Especially as you are all aware, the use of, or the misuse of the Bible to promote Christian Zionism and to justify the occupation. So similar to the Bible study groups that started at the foundations of Sabeel, we understood that Reverend Naim wanted to retire, but Reverend Naim was one of the very few group of people who was like the theological warehouse of Sabeel, the factory of the theological reflections would come out of mainly from Reverend Naim. He would, out of every 10 reflections, he would write maybe 8. And then he decided to retire and to be less involved with Sabeel as an organization, not within Palestinian liberation theology. So we went back to our roots, and since 2015-16, Sabeel has started to introduce Bible study groups in so many different parts of the West Bank and inside Israel, mainly focusing on young people and women to come together and read the Bible. This is one of the recent meetings that we've had, and these are Bible study facilitators. So we've trained over 45 Bible study facilitators. We have around over 27 Bible study groups that are regular. They meet on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, most of them. They come together, they read the Bible, and they try to answer, they try to be a more faithful group of Christians, understanding what God is saying to us and what are our responsibilities. And it's amazing because so much feedback, theological feedback, is coming to us from the different groups, especially women, youth, and young adults. Each village, each community is interpreting the Bible, the scripture, in its own different ways. So I would say basically, Sabeel, 70% of our work is taking care of these Bible study groups, preparing material, helping them in trainings, responding to their frequently asked questions, trying to defend or develop our theological understanding. So that's a very big chunk of our work that actually most of our international friends are not aware what is happening. But whoever meets these groups understands that the church is no longer under the threat of being extinct in the Middle East, or especially in Palestine and Israel. They feel it's such a beautiful movement. So many talents are happening here and there. It's interestingly, I mean, in 2 weeks, there's a conference taking place in Jordan on the Bible and the environment. And Sabeel is sending out a delegation of 10 female Bible study leaders from villages and cities across the country to come and to participate. I would say that maybe this is like one of the most important theological delegations that Palestine has ever sent out. But for them, this is so normal. They take care of so many groups in villages like Zababde or Burqin or cities like Bethlehem or Jerusalem. So that's something that is really that's something that we're extremely proud of. And sometimes people hear me reflecting on Thursday services on certain reflections. Sometimes it's not my own reflections. I'm just echoing what people in the group say. And the major thing that people are saying is that, okay, Palestinian liberation theology came because we were shocked, we were devastated as Palestinian Christians. How could our Bible, how could our faith be used to justify the oppression or the injustice that is happening in Palestine and Israel? So Palestinian liberation theology came as a theological response to challenge Christian Zionism. The younger generations now have a Kumi version of Palestinian liberation theology, and they're saying why don't we just rise up? Inspired from the story of Talitha Kumi, why don't we just rise up and do things? We don't really need to open the eyes of the Western churches or church leaders how the Bible is being misused. We need to use the Bible in a way of liberation for us. And we don't need somebody to save us. Jesus is our savior. We can save ourselves. And that is something I find that this is really amazing. This is like the second generation or third generation of Palestinian liberation theology. The church is not longer is able or feels brave enough to share its story, actually, but believes that it can also alter and change the direction of how their stories. We are writing our own destinies. And I think that's really beautiful. It's very naive. It's very ambitious. But that's a church that believes that the impossible is possible. And this is who we are. So Kumi Now is one action. So people who attend our Kumi Now meetings online, they reflect our try or our attempt or our stubbornness to bring so many people who are working on Palestine and Israel together. Let's work together. Let's hear everyone. Let's not only listen to what we are saying, let's also listen to our partners, regardless of their identity, of their background. So we're trying to bring people together. But Kumi is more than a theology, it's a theological movement. And we're trying very much to help people. I mean, it's whether remaining in touch with our Thursday services or we have Wednesday services, sometimes online for the Arabic community. This was very much prominent during COVID, but now people are back and they're able to meet on their meeting groups. And many of you, I understand, join us on every Thursday. And if you're not, please do join us. This is how you learn. This is what Sabeel is, the theological discussion. How can we really make sense of what things do not make sense? And how can we really believe in the impossible? And Sabeel has been very much, as Jonathan said, is a pioneer in introducing crazy ideas in the community. The idea of just bringing Christians together, regardless of their denomination, was a crazy idea. Sabeel also understood that there's a challenge within our, there isn't a proper or accessible health insurance for many people within our communities. So Sabeel said, why don't we just do like, it's simple. The early church was a church that shared resources and they developed their own way of living. Why just if they were able to do it in the first century, why can't we do it in 21st century? So it was like a stupid idea. And actually we're blessed from our friends. The Mennonite Central Committee liked this crazy idea and they helped Sabeel in like helping us brainstorm and to develop groups of people who are going to work on it. But at its essence, this program was focused that it's the people need to come and help us out. There's no fundraising. There's no, nobody's gonna come and help us out. Only we need to help each other as the early church. And in 1 year, In less than 1 year, we were able to get around 4,000 members, which makes us, according to the research that we've done, the biggest healthcare initiative community-based in the world throughout history. And that was something that we did on the side, a Palestinian community under occupation, a church that has so many challenges, and at the time of a pandemic. And what's amazing, when people thought that this was crazy and it's not even doable, now when we sit with the committee who was very afraid, they think it is like we should have tried harder, we could have worked more, there's so much potential for improvements. And that's the mindset, it's the mindset of the resurrection, of doing the impossible. We are no longer prisoners of what we are not able to do in our minds, but we're able to be very proactive and just to deal with things. We're tired from asking people to help, because as long as we know there's so many people who want to help, but maybe they're as helpless as us. And they also have their own challenges. We need to help ourselves. And when we are able to help ourselves, people would appreciate and enjoy helping us, or will be more willing or courageous to help us. So the health insurance is one of the different projects that we're doing. As of today, we have like 4,000 people from the parishes. We have over 45 universities, schools, organizations that are part of this coalition. And actually, we've held back, and we hope this year we will reach 10,000 people. So that is like by itself is a miracle. We were able to raise from the community close to $3 million to help each other in taking care of the medical care. I know $3 million are not much if you compare this to healthcare services in many parts of the world, but for us within the Palestinian context, it's a very huge number, given also our community. So that was something that was an amazing. But also Sabeel, since COVID has been also, has created so much opportunities for us as Sabeel. And one thing we've always was on our dream list is that how could we really address or work with the guides in Palestine and Israel? Many pilgrims come to the country. Most of the pilgrims are Christian groups, the wide majority, and they're meeting guides. And sometimes, unfortunately, they're exposed only to the Israeli narrative. They're exposed to the Zionist narrative. They're exposed only to, sometimes it's the Christian Zionist is forced upon them, whether they like it or not. And it was very difficult to help the Palestinian guides to unlearn what they've already learned through the Israeli school system, or courses that the Ministry of Tourism, the Israeli Ministry of Tourism offers. But for the first time for us, it was a miracle. All guides were sitting at home, and it was an opportunity for us to work with. They were also very welcoming to this idea, and we were blessed with the wise and friendly leadership at the Guides Union. And we have worked with over 400 guides, Palestinian guides, in the last year and a half, which we reintroduce them to the Palestinian culture, reintroduce them to the Palestinian narrative, reintroduce them to the way how to present Palestinian holy sites, Christian theology from a Palestinian perspective. That by itself, we just undid the hard work of the Israeli Ministry of Tourism for over 70 years, just in 1 year during a pandemic and on the side. So something that we thought that this was going to be impossible, it's amazing. It's now when you go into the old city and we meet the different guides, the way they speak about the streets, how they speak in Jerusalem, they give it a Palestinian character. Of course, I mean, that is not only, I mean, it's an accumulation of people's work, but that is something that we have been blessed as Sabeel to be part of this change. Sabeel continues to be the place or the center where Christians come together, the community. You know, we have like 3 Christmases in Jerusalem, which is a good thing, but you don't get like 3 gifts, unfortunately, but we get to celebrate it 3 times. And some of you have actually participated in the Christmas dinner. And the Christmas dinners are very unique of Sabeel. First of all, because there's no hierarchy and there's no people. There's no differences between women and men, between clergy or patriarchs or bishops or nuns. We are all simple, basic. We all sit together around tables, and we sit as one community regardless of our denominations. And we speak in Advent. We don't speak about Christmas trees. We speak the same Advent that with Jesus, with John the Baptist, speaking justice. We speak things that are concerning us as issues. issues that concern us in Palestine and Israel. Regardless where the challenges are coming from, we come together and we face the challenges in joy. And each year, the Christmas message is a message is that we're able to do it. We should rejoice that God came and lived among us, died for us, challenged the occupation and injustice with us as human beings. And this is something, it did not come for only a period of time, but came to teach us. That's the way. If we want to follow the way of God, the way of Jesus, it has to be the way of challenging oppression. But we do it with love, with nonviolence, and with joy and inclusivity. We also work with clergy, and Sabeel has become, so many clergy, every year we hold clergy retreats. Sometimes 45 clergy last year joined with us. This year we already have 70 clergy joining us in October. People come from different denominations, they laugh with each other. They refuse to, at the beginnings of Sabeel, they refused to speak with each other. Now they come as a community where we worship together, we eat together, we challenge each other, we learn from the experiences of each other. The first time I took part in a clergy retreat was last year, and it was just amazing for us lay people just to listen the challenges that the clergy went through COVID, the pressure, the pressure from communities, the pressures from the Ministry of Health, the pressure from their own families, the pressure. Clergy go through a lot. We sometimes as lay people try to condemn them, challenge them, say they're not doing a lot, but because we see them in their position. But when they come as people and they talk about their weaknesses, also about their gifts, about their dreams, about their sins. And that is something that is really beautiful, that they feel that Sabeel is a safe place for them to come together with despite their different backgrounds. And that is what Sabeel is. Sabeel also is like a place that insists that we need to pray together. So we pray together as the Jerusalem community. We bring different clergy to come together, but we come with parishes, with communities. We've also started to introduce different schools to come, and like in Jerusalem, all of the Christian students in so many different schools come, and we hold periodical worship services. So they get a chance to meet each other. The church is filled with 500, 600 students sometimes. They're all chanting together, they're all praying together. They're all saying that although we know that we're becoming a minority, but we're not few. And our prayers count, and our prayers are much nicer when we pray together. What is something that has really opened my eyes is that when the first time I joined a Sabeel ecumenical service, I was amazed. How could all of these clergy come together? There's so many different denominations. They're supposed to be enemies. But what is something that is really beautiful, and we thank God for this, when the young generation come, for them, that's the normal thing, that clergy come together. Why wouldn't they come together? This is just within like our short lifespan, is that things have changed from an expected sin of divisions to is that it's unity is the only way. It's why wouldn't be another? That's how life it is. I can't believe that Jerusalem has been divided for centuries, divided, and all it took is just people to be, like Jonathan said, just somebody courageous to invite people to come together. Sabeel also, we're blessed with many friends of Sabeel around the world. We have, and COVID has really helped us to get in touch with many of our friends around the world. So Sabeel, like with our friends of Sabeel France, we hold monthly or bi-monthly meetings in French. We're blessed with many Palestinian speakers who speak French fluently, and they address. Next Sunday, we have a meeting with our friends of Sabeel France, and we're speaking about the environment and the implications of the occupation. Of course, FOSNA, the biggest community of friends of Sabeel, we've been blessed to hold so many events together with them. But also with Australia, we hold now every Easter ecumenical services, and we have bi-monthly meetings with them. So we have meetings also with our friends of Sabeel Sweden. But not only we meet with our friends outside the country, we also meet with our friends inside. the country, inside Palestine, especially in each city. We invite the community to come together and we talk with each other. And that's so important, just to be the initiator of inviting people, despite the differences, despite each person, each group has have their own interests. Just for somebody needs to initiate and just say, why don't we come together and let's talk together? And that is really amazing, because when people come together, we notice how, although we feel we're sometimes very different, that it's the same challenges that we're facing. And this is where many of our ideas come. Sometimes it comes as, let's just do trips, go to communities that are isolated. But also the communities, the occupation has really divided us. People from Nazareth, many of them have never been to Jerusalem, have never been to Hebron, have never been to Bethlehem, have never been to Ramallah, have never been to these villages. We try every year to bring different communities together. The occupation has divided us. Give each Palestinian a type of ID, blue ID, green ID, an ID from area C, an ID from area B. So what we're trying to do, it's easy to build. It's very easy to build walls. It's even more harder to break these walls, especially that most of these walls are in people's minds. They think that we're so different, that our neighbors, although they're like few meters away sometimes, literally few meters, just across the street, and there's a wall dividing them, people feel that we're so different. But we're the same people. We are indigenous Palestinians of the land, and without consulting us, they decided to give our land to somebody else. The people who were very powerful, and they have fragmented us. Some of us are still in refugee camps. Some of us have been forced into the diaspora. Some of us are into areas that are Gaza, West Bank, inside Israel, the Negev. In a very small country, we've been divided into so many communities. We're trying to come together. And when the moment people come together, it's just people are reborn again, or go back to their roots. We understand how these groups, how we're very similar to each other. Sabeel also focuses on youth and scouts. We bring youth. This is a picture of the Catholic scouts. We take them to the Tent of Nations, places that you're aware of. We want to show our younger people that this is our story, this is our narrative. There is no need to be embarrassed that we are oppressed. We need to be proud that we are still resisting. There's no need to be embarrassed that many people look down at us as Palestinians or do not favor the Palestinian identity. And we should be proud. It's shame on the world that looks down on the people who are oppressed. We're proud. Jesus himself was an oppressed person. The early church, the church fathers, and many of our wonderful friends around the world, they are oppressed because of their religion, because of their identity, because of the color of their skin, and they should not be. The shame is on the people who are the oppressors, not the people who are oppressed. And Sabeel, although we very much focus on solidarity trips. It's not enough to pray or to talk about people who are oppressed. It's important to be with them. The moment that Israel labeled the 6 organizations, now 7 or maybe 10 organizations as terror organizations, we were the first group to knock on their doors and say, we're here to be with you. We called them when everybody wasn't feeling how should we do with them. We brought other church leaders, other Christian organizations, and we went into their offices and we said, we're with you. We're all in one way or another, sadly, wrongly characterized or identified as terrorists. But that's whoever is. Jesus died on the cross. The cross was the penalty of people who were seen as terrorists by the Roman occupation, the people who have been seen as problem creators. It's very important to be with the people, especially when they are under attack. And the same thing to Sheikh Jarrah. We were the first to go as churches, as communities, just to come and say, we're not going to be, don't think that you're alone. There's so many people who care about you, internationally and locally. To be with the people is very important. But sometimes, although these trips are very much glorified by many people around the world, at least within our communities, sometimes our solidarity creates conflict. Last year, Nizar Banat, a person I got the privilege to know and a very Palestinian activist spoke against, was a very open, a very big critic of the PA and the violations of the PA and the corruption of its leaders. And he was killed by Palestinian security forces during his arrest. Sabeel was the Sabeel went into so many challenges just to organize for a trip of clergy and organizations just to go and give condolences to the family. And that was something that was extremely important, to be with the family of somebody who was killed, unfortunately, by our own security forces that are supposed to provide us with safety. So sometimes this creates divisions. I mean, it is the 10th of nations, many of our community. I just came back today from Nablus. We were with another delegation. There's so many attacks that are happening on civil society, sometimes on churches, sometimes on individuals, just to be with the people who are oppressed. So this was part of a delegation that we went to stand in solidarity with the 10th of nations as they were being bothered and harassed by other by outlaws. Sabeel is also not only just does these trips, we also enter serious advocacy work. So very few are talking about it. Mainly actually Israeli Jews. The churches are very silent about it, but there is a phenomenon of burning churches, attacking Christian clergy, of attacking places of worship for the Christian community by radical Israelis. And a number of Israelis who have done the research, they say we need to confess the problem is in the Israeli curriculum. Christians are portrayed as in a very negative way in the Israeli curriculum. Parts of it we understand. Anti-Semitism has its connections with Christianity and with the church. And this is the first time that the church is not the majority for Jews, but is actually a minority. And many Israelis say it is time for us to take our revenge. And it's a serious problem. And even our churches, unfortunately, are refusing to speak openly about the racist material or the ways that Christians are portrayed in the Israeli curriculum. Now, we all know, you can imagine how Palestinians are portrayed in the Israeli curriculum, but Christians are portrayed in a very negative way. We have partners, we're working on this issue, we're trying to tackle it. How it's very difficult because Israel doesn't listen to us because we're Palestinians, we're Sabeel, but there are many people and many allies. But that's a major issue that we are not ashamed, we're not afraid to speak about. The same thing we have within the Palestinian curriculum. When the Israeli curriculum talks about Jewish history, then 70 AD is a very important history, and the temple is destroyed, the second temple is destroyed, and blah, blah, blah. And then in 1948, the Jews have returned to the Holy Land. So they skip from 70 AD till 1948. There are a few sections in the Israeli curriculum that speak about the age of the Crusades, but that's it. When you look at the Palestinian curriculum, it's the same thing. History in Palestine is only at the Canaanite time, just before Christianity, and the reason is to convince or to create an opposite argument to the Israeli Zionist narrative that we were here before the Jewish people. And then 700 AD, Islam came into Palestine and blah, 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 and then history goes on. Everybody skips or mispresents the Palestinian Christian history. So Sabeel has been very much active on saying, no, we need to learn the history of our country, regardless if it's speaking about a Jewish period, a Canaanite period, a Christian period, or a Muslim period. It's all our history. It's the history of the land that we love and we belong to, and that's what we've been trying. For the first time, we said we want to speak about the Palestinian Christian, the Christian Palestine. And the theme is by itself is very much controversial. But for the first time, it was like 90% of the audience were Muslim historians and saying, you're right, guys, we need to admit we're not doing history in a proper way. And we're hoping that we will continue to our advocacy so that we can influence the Palestinian curriculum to respect the other. Today, when we were in Nablus, we were the Samaritans. The Samaritans also feel that they are not being represented as part of the Palestinian history. Christians feel also underrepresented or in the Palestinian curriculum. The same thing other minorities in the land. If we want Palestine to be a democratic state, a state for all of its citizens, we really need to work hard. And we really need to make sure that our community is a welcoming community that accepts all people regardless of their identity. Sabeel is also very good in making publications, whether they are booklets. Some of you have attended some of our booklets. We're very blessed that Reverend Naeem is dedicating lots of time writing books. So far we have, I think, since in the last 2 years, we have like close to maybe 8 and maybe up to 10 booklets that Reverend Naeem has written. Many of you see our Sabeel Wave of Prayer. It goes on a weekly basis in 6 different languages, and on semi-weekly basis, another 10 languages. The idea is that we translate 16 prayers, the prayers into maybe 15 languages on a yearly basis is by itself is a huge project. Sabeel also is well respected, and we have a group of people, dedicated people who read our cornerstone issues, and people who also who are working on, we work on sometimes documentaries, or friends of ours who make documentaries, they rely on us in helping them in promoting it, or helping them in sharing it with people. We're working this year and before next Easter on a documentary that speaks about the violations on Holy Saturday, Holy Fire, and the Israeli restrictions on worship and freedom. So this is part of, I haven't been, sorry, I went over time. But that is part of the work that Sabeel does. I mean, these are all things that we're doing in the span of 12 months. If we want to give a presentation of what Sabeel has done in the past 5 years, it would require a much bigger presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Omar. That was great. I think at this point, we're going to turn to some questions. I have a couple, and then we'll take some from the comments. So if anyone has a question, please go ahead and type it in the comments, and then I can ask either Jonathan or Omar. I want to ask, first up, what do you see as being right now your greatest challenges? Like at this moment, what have been your greatest challenges?
As Sabeel, yes?
As Sabeel, yeah.
Yes, I mean, our greatest challenge is that it wasn't the Israeli occupation or the Zionist movement. Because in most of our history, not always, but in the majority of our history, we've been very much united. The movement, the resistance movement was ethical, based on, we knew what we were fighting for. We were fighting for a better future, for a better Palestine, for freedom and liberation. Unfortunately, through different measures and measures of the Israeli government, the Zionist movement, and also internal mistakes of us Palestinians, we have lost our unity. Not only that we are divided among Fatah and Hamas, or different political parties, we're also divided and geographically, but we're also very much divided within our own societies. There are groups of people who decided to benefit from the occupation. The occupation creates opportunities. Others who have said, we want to collaborate with the occupation. Others who said that we just want to give up. I just want to live for my daily bread. So this has really weakened us. And these are our main challenges, is how to convince the Palestinian people to remain united, regardless of the identities that we all hold. And for us to keep the movement ethical. And what I mean is ethical is that fighting for something better, rather than fighting because we hate our enemy. We should fight because we love our community, we love our we love life, not because we hate our enemy. And this is the biggest challenge, is just reminding the people of these basics.
Thank you. And a question for Jonathan before we open it up. When you were first starting out at the Bible studies there at the Episcopal Anglican Church in Jerusalem, did you imagine the movement developing the way it has?
Yeah, okay.
No.
No, I did not actually. Perhaps because I spoke English and I was educated in the West, I was very interested in the role of interpretation, presenting the Palestinian point of view to the West and to the churches. But I'm so excited to listen to Omar because really the roots of Sabeel has not been just to be a Christian voice to the West. It was to really be Christians in Palestine, to really understand our faith in a way that relates to our daily challenges. I'm thrilled to listen to Omar speak about the actual challenges that Palestinian Christians face today. The majority, of course, has to do with the occupation, but not entirely. A whole lot of it has to do with Palestinian society itself, with the churches themselves. When he speaks about ecumenism and ministers talking to each other and praying with each other, this doesn't sound very revolutionary to people in the West. But in the Middle East, it is extremely revolutionary. You have to understand, these are small groups who built their own persona around the fact that they are Greek Orthodox or Armenian or Assyrian. That is who they are. That is the essence of who they are. And so they are very jealous of their identity. And they did not even intermarry between Christian denominations until about 50 years ago. That was unthinkable. The churches would actually ring a dirge of sadness if anybody left their denomination and married a Christian from another denomination. So Sabeel, for us, ecumenism, for Christians to love one another and to be united with one another is part of the essence of what Palestinian liberation theology means. The challenges of health insurance, which doesn't exist for many people in the West Bank, to be able to present, to deal with the issues of health insurance in a very biblical way, of a supportive community coming together and addressing its needs. All this is very exciting, and sometimes I wonder whether Christians in the West who are supportive of Sabeel are aware of all these wonderful things that Sabeel is doing, not just in combating Christian Zionism and false theologies, but also in dealing within the Palestinian Christian community.
Okay, thank you. And I think for context on the health insurance, maybe just a reminder that Israelis and settlers get complete free state-covered insurance, but the Palestinians in the West Bank do not, are completely denied.
Yeah, much better than the system in the United States, by the way. It's universal.
That's not a hard bar to
it covers everybody. But for people in the West Bank, it's non-existent, basically. There's very little insurance that's available. It's very expensive and not affordable.
Okay, so I just want to ask a question that came up earlier. And it's, if Palestinian liberation theology is a body of scripture, teachings, and values that inspire people to challenge the structures of power, how can this potential be realized in Palestine when Christians constitute only about 5% of the population, if that now? For either Omar or Jonathan, you can take this question.
Well, I think I can address it because you see, in the West, you're thinking about Christians in a largely supposedly Christian society. The early church were Christians who were living in a non-Christian society. So for them to live as a Christian community under occupation or under oppression or as a minority was the normal state of affairs. They were supposed to demonstrate, model, and illustrate the kingdom of heaven, not to impose and create a Christian structure under the name of Christianity that governs all of society. So I think part of the theological task that we have is to restore the early Christian ethos of a community of people who are weak, who are a minority, but who are trying to illustrate to the rest of society something akin to the kingdom of God. What would it look like to have justice, to have just structures, to meet each other's needs, to illustrate to the world what the kingdom of God would be like?
This next question, I believe it was from Huda, for Omar, is when you mentioned people to help us, who do you mean and how can they help? Or, you know, how can we, watching here in North America or the West, come alongside our Palestinian sisters and brothers in solidarity, you know, and how can we serve them in the quest for justice, you know? So
that's a complicated question. I mean, because there's so many different layers. Part of it is that we belong to a Christian community, one community, to one church, theoretically. Many people who are, I mean, if we take this, help us in our struggle in the church. We're not happy that the Bible is being misused or our Christian faith is being misused or manipulated to justify taking over our land and dispossessing us. So that's not only the battle of Palestinian Christians, that's the battle of every Christian who would like to have to belong to a faith community that is ethical. So that is like, help us to fix the church. Another level for us is as human beings, for anybody who believes in human rights and in ethical values, we all need to work together and show solidarity that it is that the world should, every person should respect the other and respect the human rights of everyone else. That's our struggle as humans who share planet Earth together, because we don't want anybody to be oppressed. So that's also our battle for people who want these values. I hope that people are no longer thinking it's Americans should only be better, living better, or Palestinians should only be living better. We should think of each person on this planet to live together. And this is, I mean, this is the ideology of the 20th century. And with all of the treaties that were done to defend children's rights, human rights, that there is a minimum standards that we all need to respect. Another part is us as Palestinians within our national struggle. We're not able to defeat the occupation on our own. We need people to come and help us. Unlike the first two reasons that I think it's mandatory for everyone to be part of, this is like the option, because there's so much injustice around the world. And people who are in the middle of their own struggle, they look for friends, not only because it could really make our process for liberation much faster, but it could also save more lives from everyone if we are able to create pressure and to show more attention from the community that we all work together. So we need the help. We need the help of the church. We need the help of other human beings. And we need also friends who think, our friends as Palestinians, to help us, because we're unable. We've been trying for over 75 years. The challenges are great. Doesn't mean that we're not certain that we will not overcome. We're sure. Israel or the US are just one empire of so many empires that have passed over Palestine. And we've always won, and we have a very good CV and track record. But we need help. We're still having problems.
thank you. I have a question. It's from Therese, but I imagine a lot of people have a similar question. Is there a serious effort to reach out and work with the Muslim religious community in Palestine?
Yes, of course. I mean, Sabeel, the meeting that we had in Nablus, defending the church, we were both Christians, Muslims, Samaritans. Yesterday, we had a wonderful meeting with a number of Jews, Jews who identify themselves as Arab Jews. They don't like Zionism. They feel that Zionism has also deprived them from their Arab identity. They don't see Zionism as part of their identity. They see Arabness. They like Arabic music. They like Arabic culture. They see themselves as Arabs. They feel Arabs. So it's our struggle is very inclusive. Everybody is welcome. We don't differentiate depending on religion. But we differentiate according to values. In Palestinian liberation theology, the three fundamental pillars of our theology, one is inclusivity, loving everybody, accepting that everybody is God's children, regardless if they think like us or they don't think like us. We're all created by God. The second pillar is justice. Justice is very important. We need to not only improve conditions inside cages, we need to release people out of help people to break out of these cages. And the third is nonviolence. These values could be echoed by seculars, by Muslims, by Jews, and they could also be, and Christians could disagree with these values. So our value system, our understanding what Jesus came to teach us, these three values in Palestinian liberation theology, we find them being echoed in so many different faith communities. So that is what Palestinian liberation theology is. It doesn't mean that we are not anchored in Christ. It doesn't mean that we are not a Christian organization. But if there are people who stand for the same values with us, they're our friends.
May I jump in on that particular issue? For many Palestinian Christians and their supporters abroad, we have been almost shy to insist on our identity as Christians because we were facing so much persecution and so much racism and so much discrimination. We were almost militantly secular, aggressive about saying it doesn't matter whether we are Christian or Muslim, we are both the same, we are living under the same oppressive occupation. So part of the challenge of Sabeel liberation theology was to say, we are Christians. We do these things because we are followers of Christ. It doesn't mean we're better than anybody else. It doesn't mean we don't care about anybody else. It doesn't mean we don't work with and cooperate with everybody else. But it does mean that we are doing these things precisely because of our Christian identity, because we love Christ, because Christ taught us to do those things, because Christ was cared for the poor and the oppressed, because Christ was no respecter of persons, because Christ's salvation is open to everybody, so we also are inclusive. But that doesn't deny our specific Christian identity.
Thank you. I have two questions. I'm going to ask them together, and either of you could respond. Recently, the Presbyterian Church, PCUSA, called out Israel as an apartheid state. Do you know what other denominations or Christian groups have done the same? And then just this week, have you heard about how the Palestinian Christian contingent at the World Council of Churches Assembly has been received and if their voices have been heard? So if Jonathan or Omar, you both want to.
Well, I don't know that I can answer that question fully. I do know that for the World Council of Churches meeting in Germany specifically, the use of the word apartheid was problematic because they were under pressure. As a lawyer, of course, for me, the word apartheid is not just a pejorative term. It's not a curse word. It's not just to make Israel look bad or delegitimize it. It's a specific crime under international law that has certain elements. When you use law and regulations to impose a system of governance that allows one group to dominate other groups, and when you use certain procedures, torture, deportation, massive violations of human rights, you meet the criteria for the international definition of apartheid. And that becomes important in and of itself. We're not saying we are like South Africa. In fact, in many ways, it is worse than South Africa. The question is, does it meet the three basic elements in the crime of apartheid? And for many Christians, that is a difficult step to take because of the past behavior of the Christian church, where it was anti-Semitic and where it was discriminating against Jews. So they feel less capable of taking up a position of justice for the Palestinians on the basis of morality and ethics, because they have failed themselves in the past.
Omar, do you know anything about the Palestinian contingent to the World Council of Churches that went, or?
Yeah. So I mean, that's I'm just going to comment about this question. Is that, I mean, the first part is that yes, churches are changing. They're speaking, they're becoming more vocal, or there's a bigger number of churches that are being more vocal. Even very traditional evangelical churches who have been traditionally very much pro-Zionist are also becoming more willing to listen and to echo some of the Palestinian voices. With the World Council of Churches, I have to admit that it's not something that was like of interest for me personally, or at least at Sabeel's attention, or for most Palestinian Christians that I know of. We don't see that the decisions that we need to advocate, I don't feel that I need to convince a German or a Dutch or an English priest or somebody that or a church leader or a bishop to grant me justice. The fight needs to be here in Palestine. It's a waste of our time to go, and they already know. It's not like a new conflict that not everybody has all of the dots to connect. Everybody knows. They have chosen to be silent, shame on them. But that does not really affect my struggle. We're experiencing occupation and violence. And I think as Sabeel, or as Omar, at least, maybe as Omar, I shouldn't speak as Sabeel, we are not as interested in opening the eyes of the church leaders. We're more interested in breaking the chains in our hands. So that is like our Kumi theology, and that's my understanding. I'm not going to give them the pleasure to think that they are the ones who decide my future or the future of my children. It's more precious for me just to hand it over to the church leaders.
I like that spirit, but I want to also say that it is part of our struggle to call upon solidarity from the international community. That was the whole point behind BDS. That's the whole point behind international law and conventions. That we are all part of the same human race, and what other people do influences us. Speaking here in the United States as an American, I wish the United States stayed out of the whole Israeli-Palestinian situation, but it doesn't. It is involved, and it is massively involved on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of morality, on the wrong side of international law. So yes, part of the struggle is to address that. But I love the spirit that Omar is conveying here. That ultimately our liberation has to be centered on our own people and on what is happening in Palestine itself, rather than in some kind of church organization abroad making statements or issuing resolutions or reaching statements rather than actions.
Okay. So this sort of leads into my next question, or the next question that came in, is then how do we advocate for theological liberation for Palestinians with our own church, like in a positive way, in a way that could make a difference?
I mean, I can't remember. I mean, one of the things that really got many Christians frustrated and upset is that when Trump was holding a Bible and made a comment, I can't remember what the context of it was. I mean,
It was a photo op.
Sorry?
It was a photo op. They cleared out a whole bunch of Black Lives Matter protesters with the police fairly militantly, so Trump could walk across the street and hold up a Bible in front of a church that didn't support him. Actually, it was more of I think it was an Episcopal church that was not even. So anyway, that's context.
And I mean, it's people didn't like that the Bible is being misused. So there are certain places that when we feel that our faith is being misused to justify oppression of one group or another, we should fight it back. So whenever people who are listening, I mean, it's like when the U.S. ambassador with the moving of the embassy used anti-Semitic, used Christian Zionist language and anti-Semitic languages during the opening of the embassy. And many times in the Congress, at the UN, you find when Palestine and Israel is being discussed, you feel that there's a biblical quote here, a biblical quote there. You find many church leaders, when we challenge them to speak on human rights violations in Jerusalem, they throw biblical quotes. That should not be tolerated anymore. That's shame on them. I mean, it's no longer we should tolerate the misuse of our faith to justify oppression.
Thank you. Let me check to see it. One question came in, and I know the answer to it, but are you connected and have a relationship with the Pilgrims of Ilublin? Pronunciation. Yes, sorry.
Yes.
Right. Forgive me.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of our co-founders of Sabeel. Co-founder was Bishop Elias Shakur. At that time, he was Father Elias Shakur. And he is a remarkable person, and his struggle in Galilee is an amazing struggle. So Sabeel, actually, we have a very, and he has spoken multiple times on Sabeel Kumi events, and we would like to host him again if the chance comes up. And he's been present in many of our conferences. And the Pilgrims of Abilene do amazing work, similar to so many different organizations. So yes, our motto at Sabeel is build bridges, connect with people. Let's all march together. And Pilgrims of Abilene is one of our partners.
Thank you. Just going to see quickly if there are any other questions that I have.
Can I go to Jesse, can I go to the previous question about
yes, please.
that was given? Sometimes the whole issue of Christian pilgrimage to the Holy Land becomes of great importance to Sabeel, because we see busloads of tourists coming in, traveling through our land, going to the holy places and going back to their country without ever seeing or interacting with the local Palestinian Christians, without feeling our pain, without in any way having communion with us. And they go back and they become part of the oppressive structures against us. Using the Holy Land and the holy places and the fact that they visited the Holy Land to justify their Christian Zionism and to justify their oppression of us. This is very sensitive for most Palestinian Christians. I mean, apart from the fact that we live in the Holy Land and pilgrimage and tourism is part of our mission and has been for centuries, to see that that is being used as the Bible itself is being used as a tool against us and for our own oppression is hurtful. So part of the work of Sabeel, and also I might add FOSNA and other friends of Sabeel, is to connect with those tour organizations, to conduct our own tours so that people come visit the holy places, yes, but also visit the living stones, deal with the Palestinian Christians, find out what is really happening in the Holy Land these days. That becomes part of our mission, part of our responsibility, and part of what we care about. So when we hear about conventions and conferences and World Council of Churches and others, one of the things we want to tell them is, please, when you come to visit on pilgrimage, talk to us, visit us, worship with us, learn from us, as well as visiting just the Holy Land.
Thank you. With that, I want to highlight, I saw some comments too about this, highlight two events that are coming up, two webinar events that FOSNA is very excited about happening. One is on September 24th, hosted by St. Mark's Cathedral and the Bishops' Committee for Justice and Peace in Kairos Puget Sound. It's called The Holy Land, What's Next? A conversation among faith leaders witnessing to justice and peace in Israel-Palestine, featuring Naimatik, Richard Toll, the founder basically of FOSNA, and then Don Wagner, Jonathan Kuttab, Mark Braverman, Alice, I can't speak today for some reason, Alice Rothschild, and Rana Harb. Amazing conversation that will be on the 24th of this month. And then we're also very excited. Our Southern California Friends of Sabeel group is hosting a conference, Christian Support for the State of Israel, Is It Biblical? And that's October 1st. So both coming up quickly, two very exciting topics. And that one is with, in addition to Jonathan Kuttab, Reverend Dr. Stephen Sizer, and Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac. And so that was the 24th and the 1st. At this point, I also would like to see if Omar and Jonathan have any final words or thoughts to say before we move on to our last item. You're on mute, Jonathan.
Until Jonathan unmutes, I just want to say that an important part of what Sabeel does is actually our international friends of Sabeel around the world. We really appreciate the work that they do in amplifying the voices of what the movement is doing here in Palestine. The solidarity, the love, the care that comes in through either volunteering, sending donations, joining our activities, taking part of in our campaigns, really is very much appreciated from the Sabeel community, the Sabeel staff, and the Sabeel board, and the founders of Sabeel. So your presence around us is something that we very much thank God for every day. So thank you, because you are also an amazing part of what Sabeel is today.
Thank you, Omar. Jonathan?
Yeah, I want to echo that same sentiment. I think that all of you on this call and all the different friends of Sabeel, we are part of the same body. And when one part of the body hurts, the other part hurts as well. And when one part is glorified, the other also is glorified. So I want to also add my deep felt gratitude and thanks to all of you on this call, and to all of you who have been supporting the work of Sabeel in Jerusalem, and of FOSNA in standing alongside Sabeel and carrying out its mission and being a Christian voice for Palestine wherever we can.
Thank you so much. And now Jonathan and Omar have not said this, but I will. Part of being a friend of Sabeel, I see is giving of our time, talents, and treasure. And I highly encourage you, and I'm gonna say this and bring this up and I'm gonna put a link here. If you're at all able to support the work of Sabeel, the work of Omar, amazing work they're doing, I put a link in here to donate. This actually link goes 100% of everything. We facilitate it. We give you your tax write-off, but 100% goes straight to Sabeel in Jerusalem. And I highly encourage you, click that link, help them, support them as best as you can, whether it's $5 or $105. I'm going to make the pitch proudly and unapologetically because they're doing, Omar and the whole team is doing phenomenal work. So I'll leave that there. And with that, thank you everyone so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Omar, for staying up so late. I saw that in the comments. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you for such an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you, friends. Thank you. God bless you all.